Today we continue our My Calling series, and we're pleased to have Mark Deeg and Io with us today. Mark grew up in this congregation, and the last few years, maybe you've noticed, as have I, that he's come back to visit his folks a weekend in this time of year. And so Mark and I have had a number of conversations about different topics and some theological discussion, and I don't remember what the timing was exactly, but I said to him, if you're coming back again, we'd love to have you in our My Calling series to share about your calling. And I think at that time you were with Eli Lilly, and so they have now left Indianapolis and moved to San Diego, California. Why anybody would want to live in San Diego, I have no idea. And so Mark is an endocrinologist, and he'll tell you what that means. I just know that's what he is. He'll tell you what that means. And Mark, we're very pleased to have you today to share with us. I'll take that. That's from the 7th day, I noticed. To have you share with us about your calling. We're all yours.
Thanks, Bob. I'm just going to sit up front make it informal. And as Pastor Bob said, I grew up in this neighborhood. I mean, Mom and Dad lived just a couple miles from here.
Louder, Mark.
Okay. You didn't bring your
Yes, Mom.
did you? We grew up here just a couple miles from here, just out by what used to be the Maplewood Bowl. It no longer exists, but Croston was in that area and lived there, grew up there. Went to John Glenn, went to North St. Paul High School, and did things as teenage boys do that I won't admit in public. And as Bob said, grew up in this church, and was active as an confirmed here, active as an acolyte. I remember I just sort of remembering some of the things that as the candles are being lit, taken down. Back then we had a little puffer, and my goal was to average only one puff per candle. I was 1.1. I wasn't perfect. Served an usher for many years in high school after confirmation, and was active in the church. I remember going to Colorado in 1974 in an RV. Where's Marianne? She's not here. She was part of the group back then. If you might recall, streaking was popular in the mid-'70s. Dave Goose and I decided to do a little of that in Colorado. The influence of the church, you know.
Did you save the bow tie?
Didn't save the bow tie. But I think, before I get a little more into my calling, is that I was thinking a little bit about, they kept asking me last night, what are you going to talk about? What are you going to talk about? And I have no idea. But as I thought about it, I realized, as I think back and reflect upon my calling, I think the underlying theme is sometimes I really didn't recognize God was giving my calling until long afterwards. I just didn't see it at the time. And the calling is, as Bob mentioned, I'm an endocrinologist. I saw patients for a long time, but why did I become an endocrinologist? That's really, I guess, where that starts. Is, after graduating from high school, I went to Minnesota Duluth to go to college. It wasn't cold enough here, so I decided to go farther away. And was really interested in just chemistry, hardcore chemistry. And then the junior year in college, my youngest sister died from type 1 diabetes. And I'm tearing up a little bit. And that's when I knew I wanted to use my talents more in helping people and go from just science to helping people. And that was really the turning point. And I wanted, obviously, endocrinology is dealing with hormones, so things like diabetes and thyroid and cholesterol and things of those nature. And because my sister died from type 1 diabetes, I wanted to be an endocrinologist. Now, at that time, it worked out quite well in terms of my wanting to my scientific interests as well as my medicine interests, because endocrinology and the sciences were quite intertwined. And that really was the beginning, I guess. And it really was about again, thinking through the entire career was about helping people. We'll end up with community market here in a second, but it really was about helping people. And but not really recognizing at the time, because that's what I found great satisfaction in. And so after undergraduate school in Duluth, and then went to, did my MD training in Minnesota, here in Minneapolis, did time in Cleveland for 2 years. So you guys have to show.
Time. What's that mean?
So you got the joke. So did some training in Seattle was the first foray into the West Coast, and then I settled in Indiana over 20 years ago, and really started a career in academia. And that really was about my specialty. Within that specialty was really what I call sweet and greasy blood. That is, people with diabetes who had cholesterol problems. So that was the beginning of my career in terms of, I mainly saw patients at the VA, and I loved taking care of the vets. They really were, I met some phenomenal guys. I met some, they were very appreciative of the care that they got there. I won't make comments about the system, but the vets were really grateful for the care that they got. And the mission really there was to, because I was interested in diabetes and cholesterol, those are really the main factors for heart disease, right? So the mission really was to reduce the burden of heart disease on people. And so it was teaching, it was doing research, it was seeing patients, and trying to extend that reach. And one of the other themes in my career is if you really want to help people, how big a sphere of influence do you want? Okay? So when you're a physician, you see patients, because I enjoyed seeing patients, is you really make a big impact on the people you take care of. And that might be a few thousand that you might really immediately impact and make a big difference on. But if you weren't really thinking big, it's not big enough. But I didn't. So I left academia after about 10 years and went to work for Eli Lilly, which is also in Indianapolis, and we were in Indianapolis. And it was easy because I was at the university, down the street, literally 2 miles away was Eli Lilly. So I finished work on Friday at the university, and Monday started at Lilly. My kids didn't know for 3 months that I changed jobs. I kept saying, how come you're home on Saturdays? But I realized that transition was, if I really wanted to influence the world, you needed a bigger organization. And so to bring a drug to market can really influence millions of people around the world. And so it took that big an organization to have that kind of impact. And so 10 years there, in extending my reach and influence on potentially helping patients, is to now just recently moving to San Diego to a small biotech, where I can have now even bigger influence. We're in a therapeutic area that's very new and very novel, and the potential at this point to be even a bigger impact, a whole new therapeutic class. So as I look back upon my career, I see this expanding my sphere of influence from the direct patient care, which is very satisfying, and I miss to a great extent. But part of it that I don't miss was emotionally it was so hard for me because I got so caring for my patients. It was just gut-wrenching because many times, particularly in Cleveland, many times with the vets as well, as they came from lower socioeconomic areas that they just lived in horrible places, and most of their health problems I could directly relate to their living conditions. They had poor diets, poor living conditions, just horrible social situations, which I had no control over or very few resources to address. And that was very frustrating and just tore me up. It was just very difficult to do. So expanding influence in terms of affecting people in the world. Now the hard part is, of course, is that I don't see those people. The people you deal with directly, you deal with one-on-one, that they became not friends, but people that I cared a lot about, right? And you see them on an occasional basis. But as you expand your influence, you don't have that direct connection anymore. It's just like, I know I'm doing good, but I don't see it. But I know I'm doing good. So how's my faith influence that? Where does that come in? as I mentioned, I was quite active as a kid, teenager through high school. Probably in part because of Mom. You will go.
Thank you, Mom.
And I will admit, I sort of, leaving high school and leaving Cross, really, I won't say lost my faith, but sort of what came in the background. It just wasn't active anymore. And really, it was sort of dormant for many, many, many years. I have to admit, it was rediscovered, after my first divorce, only divorce. But that's when I sort of really rediscovered my faith. And it's something actually that my wife Io and I have shared in our marriage, which has really been a nice blessing. And there are many things that I'm thankful for and now recognize as blessings. And of course, it starts with just picking the right parents, right? And getting those values that they give you. Growing up in Minnesota, this is something that Io and I talk a lot about. Is the Midwest is really different than the rest of the country in terms of its values and neighborhoods and just the culture that occurs. And I can't help but think it's like, when it's 20 below out, everyone needs to help everyone. And there's a real community that happens in neighborhoods here in the Midwest. We saw that here in Minnesota growing up, in Indiana growing up there as well, a real sense of community in the neighborhoods. Something we just haven't experienced in California. And as a matter of fact, we've now, just developed some close friends who are from Minnesota, which is sort of ironic. But many blessings in terms of being part of Cross, the education that we got in the school districts. Of course, it all comes with that. We were talking a little bit with Tammy and I earlier, how the immigrant family, and obviously I'm a son of immigrants, how important education is. And it's something that my parents just drilled into us, and I drilled into my children subsequently. And the foundation that this District 622 provided that foundation. Obviously, blessings for my children, my wife. It's really been fantastic. And now weaving into the community market a little bit in terms of it was time to give back and recognize all the blessings that had come upon my way for all sorts of reasons. It's a way of giving back. For Io and I, our philanthropic goals have really been about education and giving and supporting those less fortunate. I was very active in the community faith-based services back in Indiana, and we started supporting the Jet Fuel program a few years ago, recognizing that this really intersected those philanthropic goals. Now, what better place than the place where I grew up? It's the place that I it all, in a sense, all started. That's talk about really giving back, right? And it becomes we talk about expanding influence in the world of medicine, but now coming down back to the personal level and making that difference. And that's really very, very rewarding. I'm getting goosebumps just to people's lives so directly, to hear the stories about those who in need, some of the stories I'm already hearing today about, I don't know if we have money to buy food next week, and they come back and say, we can help. What a powerful message that sends, and what a way to give back and say, I got a great start. If I can help you get you that education, and I actually think back to Ron Crushwitz. We were talking Ron Crushwitz, who's still at John Glenn, although retired, works almost every day apparently, I'm told. We had this, so he was my social studies teacher in 7th grade. And we had this, the whole spring semester was around this role-playing class. And I remember very distinctly that one of my messages from my team was really around education is a very important component to just contributing to society and making contributions to society. And now in real life, to be able to do that to families is my hope is that through these programs that these kids can go on to be successful. I had to throw a little plug in my oldest daughter, who works at a charter school in San Jose, and their goal is to get these kids to be the first to go to college in their families. I mean, and something very similar. The stories that she tells. There's one kid and I was telling you the frustration around people's health problems or things I couldn't deal with. So I'll share one story from her, just because it's so similar. And I guess it sort of fits into in a sense, the Deeg family sort of mission. That she had one student in her kindergarten class who was just very disruptive, and she was having a hard time connecting with and getting him to learn in class. And the story's pretty sad. The story is he was born while mom was in jail. So while we should continue to serve time, aunt raised a child who was abusing the child. Mom gets out of jail, takes the child back, feels so guilty, is now having difficult parenting skills, and sort of really struggle with being a parent. Dad is on death row in California for selling drugs. Kid's 5. At 50, I couldn't handle this kind of situation. This kid's 5. He has no skills. He has nothing to. How do you teach that kid when his bigger problems are just life in general? That's tough. So the community market really is an offspring of, in the Deeg Family Foundation, is really an offspring for Al and I for that our philanthropic goals is not just for us through our lifetimes, but for actually for the family and our kids continue on and hopefully on for generations. And the community market is really a part of that. I have to tell a story. I think you may have heard the story a bit about how this whole thing started. It's a great story. I've been supporting Jet Fuel Pack for a couple of years. And after a while, I started asking questions from Sylvia and Michelle, and how's it going? How many patients? I'm sorry. How many families are you reaching? What is the community like? How can you expand it? And I've asked the faithful question, and it really wasn't. The question really was a chance to ask them to think unlimited, to unrestrict their thoughts, and simply ask, what could you do if money was no object? The whole idea, just let go of the chains, let go of the constraints, dream big, think big, what could it look like? Oh my God, what did I write? No, I shouldn't say this. They took it literally. I use it as a management tool, but the result has been fantastic. So I have to give credit to Michelle and Sylvia. They took that idea and just ran with it, and had great partners with John Glenn, the right principal, with Samantha and the American Food Show. The partnership has been phenomenal, and it taught me a really valuable management lesson with the success of this program. I mean, you think about this, it's like 5 months into it now, 4 months, something like that, and just the success and how it's grown. One of the lessons for me was making sure you had the right people for the job. Sometimes when you're managing an organization, as I've done, is sometimes you settle in for, I just sort of take what I get kind of thing, kind of people-wise, but if you have the right people and the right jobs, I mean, you can do anything. I mean, you truly can. And that was really a valuable lesson, because they really demonstrated that. So. So, as I mentioned, I think, my faith has influenced those decisions and wanting, really doing what's right. And it's not about the recognition or that. It's just helping people and doing what's right. And that's part of the satisfaction I get from the community market, the same satisfaction I got from taking care of patients. It's doing what's right, making a difference, and you're not asking for anything in return, just because you know in your heart it's the right thing to do. it's pretty powerful. Pretty powerful.
Mark, I would like to say thank you from me, because you've been doing this, you and your wife. It helps me get out in the community and see the need and see the smile on the people's faces when they can leave with sacks of food and supplies to carry them through. So not only are you helping those people, you're helping me and I'm sure others here. So thank you.
My pleasure. It's really been
Amazing.
It's been neat. As we were talking about last summer about the community market, about the acorn planting that seed, and it's gone actually beyond my wildest dreams in terms of, the idea was just Cross and John Glenn and that little night there and making that successful, right? And already thoughts around. I didn't think about other community services coming in, being where the need is. Duh, of course. And the whole idea of bringing it, and Samantha, and we'll talk a little bit about this, is that you bring the need to bring the market to the people as opposed to the other way around. You suddenly realize there was a big need, that people weren't going for all sorts of reasons, right? And I'm sure Samantha could tell you all sorts of things, reasons why. But it's how do you, and now I'm putting on my business hat, executive hat, so how do you meet that need, how do you grow the need? I think the survey that they did last month was actually quite helpful in terms of trying to understand, are you meeting that need? We all have these preconceived notions of what we think they want, but you have to ask them. And are you thinking the same way? How do you reach these people? I still worry about people who aren't coming. How do we complete the mission? How do we expand the mission to people who aren't coming, who either because they don't know or don't want to, or there are other barriers that's bringing them in? I'm sure there's also the discussion that's gone around that. But to your point, is that I think it's really affected everyone involved has been influenced one another. To see the students involved, to see the high school wrestling team show up, it's like, how cool is that? That's pretty awesome, right? The idea, and I think it's been kicked around, that perhaps bring it district-wide and expanding the whole idea is like, I never even thought of that. But it's the right people with the right vision, and then now with some success, and I think that was really important for us, and that's one thing I wanted to make sure, that this first year was successful, that the community market could focus on just being successful, working out all the logistical details, working out the partnerships. All those little details to make the execution was crucial. It all really comes down to execution. I'll tell a little execution story since I'm in Minnesota. So I was in Boston for a conference a number of years ago, and a small auditorium, and Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, was there. Now, being a Colts fan, I want to stand up in the back and say Patriots suck, but I realized in Boston that's not the thing to say. But the reason Robert Kraft was there, because his family had given $20 million to Harvard to initiate a program on precision medicine, or it's called personalized medicine, that is picking the right medicine for the right patient kind of thing. And he talked about something which is so crucial. And he was sort of lecturing the Harvard professors at the time. He was saying, you guys always have great ideas, but it's always about execution. Now, not about cheating, but execution. And that really stuck to me because it truly is. You can have the greatest ideas, but unless you can execute, they're just ideas, and you're not making that impact. And so that's why it was so important for this very first year to focus on execution and making it work. And worry about the money later. And so, I think they off to a great start. So I'm pretty proud of you guys, and the partnership as well. I think what we've seen from, I haven't met Joe yet, but the principal from John Glenn has been very supportive and interactive, and great goals. So.
Can I say something along those lines? As far as execution is concerned, I was on the board of stewardship with Sylvia and a number of other people here at the same time. And it was only last year at this time of the year where this idea was even brought up. At that time, she was talking about anonymous givers, because the idea was still being fleshed out. So from going to a year ago, just an idea, to now, which is a fully functional community market, speed of the execution is very impressive, and it owes a lot to backing and connections and work primarily. So again, not to take focus away from you, thank you very much. But
no, it's all about the partnership. We've talked about it quite a bit, and you're exactly right. It's a lot of hard work. A lot of people had to believe and want to make it happen. And without that, we wouldn't be here where we are today because of that. But it's pretty cool. Yes.
To go back to your endocrinologist work, are you the reason all the commercials are on TV now? Because did you know that diabetics have, heart disease? That's prevalent? Because that wasn't ever talked about for a long time.
So that was something. It's really been interesting how information gets out to the public. And the direct-to-consumer advertising has really been kind of, some people have been questioning the ethics of that, if that's really good or not. My general feeling is I think we get more educational benefits out of that than we do negative things out of that. And the doctors might plan like, oh, I heard about this drug, I should be on this drug, and I want to get this prescription. That's the challenging part. Sometimes it's not appropriate. So am I personally responsible for that? No. But that's something, that message really started about 20 years ago, back when I was in academia, that the idea that people with diabetes, both type 1 and type 2, really have an increased risk for cardiovascular disease. And something's been in the medical community for a long time. But it's surprising to me, as much as the medical community has known that, the general public has not. And that message has not gotten through. So that's where I think these types of commercials and sort of public education. Now, on the commercial side, is obviously the more patients are aware, the more willing to take these medicines, etc. And so it does increase the treatment. And of course, that's drug companies are part of the reason for raising that awareness, that just for that reason. But this is a discussion I have. My brother, who's a political economist, talks about the digital drug. So,
Mark,
yeah.
Talking about drugs, what does it take for a new drug to bring to market? Drugs that you're trying to develop?
Well, it probably takes anywhere from 5 to 10 years and $1 billion or more to do that. So it's a pretty intensive undertaking to do that. And this is where my brother and I have this discussion. I mean, I think drugs do bring value to humans in society by relieving illnesses and other comorbidities or miseries, etc. And it's expensive. And so, as a society, the government was funding this. We wouldn't have money for anything else practically because it takes so much money. So the way to raise money to do this, I always use the financial markets to do that. So that's sort of how you raise money. And of course, investors are expecting some return on their money. But back to your point, I think raising general awareness through these commercials, I think, is good. I mean, the more that people know about their diseases and around their health and the risk that they have, the better it is. They can make better decisions. Yeah.
As Sherry was saying that, the analogy to use is like when I go to my doctor for treatment, I've read everything I could find on the internet already. And it's a challenge for a doctor because too much information and that's not always accurate, and they have to struggle. But they do want their patients involved because they can't be everything to that patient that they need to be. They don't know you completely, and so I can see where that would be real challenging as a doctor.
Yeah, I would actually. One of the reasons I read the newspaper was I wanted to see what was being published in the paper around various medical issues because I knew patients are going to be rolling in next week asking those kinds of questions, so at least know what was said. So part of the healthcare provider's responsibilities, I think, is to help educate and sift through all that stuff. There's a lot of stuff on the internet, and sometimes it's hard to figure out how to put it all together to make heads or tails out of the information. So they can provide that understanding. You should be able to put in the context of your particular health.
$1 billion is a lot of money to develop a drug. Who decides we're going to spend $1 billion for this as opposed to $1 billion for that?
It comes from two areas, actually. So there's obviously companies will decide in terms of, since they are a business, they have to figure out what can I develop that in a sense will make money, right? That helps. In a sense, what happens with those profits is it goes back to fund the next generation of research. So that's one mechanism how that's decided what gets developed. For what? The other mechanism actually comes from policy in the government. By offering different incentives for this disease or that disease. So a good example is orphan diseases. Orphan diseases are diseases where less than 30,000 people have the disease in the country. So they can be pretty rare genetic diseases. And for most companies, it's too difficult to develop or too cost prohibitive to develop such a small population. But the government says, we'll give you certain incentives for that, and we can direct things towards orphan diseases. So, for example, there's some 7,000 orphan diseases that are known, right? Some as few as 50 or 60 people might have it, and some as many, tens of thousands. And so they will offer incentives to develop drugs for those diseases and indications. And many companies smaller companies will do that because they can afford to do that and because of those incentives. So that's how I think that gets decided.
Are there international efforts, or is it we in this country have ours and Lilly has theirs, or, I mean, there are people I assume doing research in Europe and Asia and...
Yeah, each company obviously will have their own interests and areas of expertise. Each government or drug regulatory agency will also have their interests as well, gearing more towards their particular population. Are they coordinated? Not really. Because, I mean, for example, the Japanese regulatory agencies are really not worried, but concerned primarily for Japan. China for China, U.S. for the U.S. Now, some of the things developed here obviously can be used worldwide. But each regulatory agency is primarily dealing with their own region and constituents.
Wouldn't some of the cancer foundations support some of the drug companies also, though, to improve drugs for lung cancer, to improve, drugs for, brain cancer, the different kinds of cancers? Wouldn't some of that be funded by the Cancer Society?
So like the community market, everything requires a partnership. So in any drug development, the partnerships will involve industry, will involve government, will involve academia, can involve the foundations. And it really takes that partnership to bring anything to market. So sometimes the ideas are coming from academia that have been funded by something like the Lung Association or something like that. And then they'll get this idea, and then Lilly might then, or Pfizer might then be able to bring it to market. So it really takes that partnership of all the different parties to get ideas and to try to bring new medicines to market.
When you're working, I know cancer, they're developing where they can take your cells and make them fight the cancer and stuff. Is that what you're doing with diabetes or whatever?
There's been all sorts of ideas to try and use our own cells to either fight cancer or to take stem cells and grow them into other types of cells. I personally have not been involved in that in a company, but there's been a lot of research that's done that. I think the immuno-oncology field, which you're talking about, basically taking your own cells that naturally fight foreign cells and foreign bacteria and fight it against the cancer. There's different ways to try and get them to do that. It's actually pretty kind of cool. It's kind of cool. I mean, actually, Jimmy Carter's a good example. He had a pretty extensive, he actually brain metastases from his cancer. Got some immuno-oncology.
Go build a house.
Gone. Yeah, he's going to build another house, right? It's just phenomenal. I remember back in the 70s. Why do I keep coming back to the 70s?
That was a good year.
My formative years, I guess. Richard Nixon declared war on cancer. You may remember that. This crowd has much gray hair, more than I, most of it. So he declared war on cancer. Now, have we won that war? No, but think of how far we've come in those 40 years, right? I mean, a lot of diseases now are considered cures. Some of the cancers. Cancer's a tough bugger, though. It really is. But we're making progress. And if we can use our own body, I mean, the body's an amazing thing. It truly is. The more I study it, the more I realize whatever God was thinking, He was thinking the right thing. Because it's just amazing. And that reminds me, I'll get into our discussions here in just a second. The more I learn, the more I realize that it's an extremely exquisite system that He created. It's just amazing as we try and learn more and more. The level of complexity and the beauty of it is just phenomenal. It's truly phenomenal. Bob was sort of alluding to, and I'll come into this, as you can tell, I was trained as a scientist, as a Western scientist in Western medicine. And for the longest time, I could not reconcile faith with science. It didn't jive. I just could not. My wife and I had some of these discussions. I just struggled with it. I believed in God, I believed in science, but I couldn't get the two together. And about a year and a half ago, I was back visiting Minnesota, and I walked to the reception line and shook Bob's hand and said, "Bob, I need a consult." And I said, I need some help. I really need to, I'm struggling with, I can't get these two things to reconcile. And so we shared some books and some papers about, I think Peters was in my primary office we were talking about. We had a couple of discussions over the phone. We basically had what we would call a journal club. We read some book chapters and read some papers independent of each other, and then like a book club, and then would meet on the phone and then discuss it and just exchange ideas in terms of how to, from Bob's viewpoint from religion and philosophy, my viewpoint as a scientist, how do we come together and agree? And what's written before and really helped me was there really two angles from trying to answer the same question, and coming back with this, trying to come up with the same answer. And those discussions really helped me recognize that they are not opposed to each other, right? That there are certainly things in science that we can only understand science only to the depth of level that we can see and observe, right? We can't go beyond that. And once I sort of got to that point, I realized that it was that sort of that continuum that I was limited to what I could do science-wise just because of the nature of the business, right? And that the next step was taking it to, and faith is faith. You believe or you don't believe. And that's why they call it faith, right? I think, and so sometimes you can't articulate the evidence or whatever, you just believe. But that actually helped me quite a bit in terms of what I do science-wise.
If I could just say one thing about that. As I recall, we decided that for the next conversation, the congregation should fly to San Diego.
Start researching grants.
So last week it was 70 and sunny. Although we had some frost one day and that freaked out the natives. Marv.
I recall an article, maybe somebody else, I don't remember it, but I remember that the heading was, why does the scientists believe in God? You ever run across that?
I have not that particular one, but there's a lot of people have written, or a lot of scientists have written around things that Albert Einstein wrote. The current head of NIH, Francis Collins, has written around that. He's a strong Christian who leads the largest scientific organization in the country. So a lot of scientists have written around that just because they all, I think, have to come to the how to reconcile those two, one way or another.
I know this is my third question.
It's okay.
How many miracles have you witnessed? Unrefutable.
Starting with community market.
mean, I'm trying to think back to all the things I saw taking care of patients in the hospital. And I at the time didn't characterize them as that. I probably, like I said, I probably didn't recognize them as such at that point.
When you look back.
When I look back, actually one sticks out actually. In this case, you probably think of a miracle that someone survived or was cured or something like that. I'm actually thinking the other way around. There was one patient I saw, homeless man, alcoholic. I'd seen a couple times at the VA. Last time I saw him, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And the pancreatic cancer, if you've not had the unfortunate experience of it, you know, in your family or a friend, it's pretty miserable because it's usually pretty silent until it's diagnosed, and it's pretty extensive and pretty painful for the patient. I don't know if I would call it a miracle, but I think it was a blessing that his passing. It was horrendous. It was just absolutely horrendous. And that was, thinking about faith, that was actually, I'm glad you asked that question and I went down this road, because I realized that thinking back to when I was back in medical school and then through residency, you're really making life and death decisions. I mean, literally life and death decisions. And I really struggled with, who am I to make that, at that time, back in the 70s, this may have been the 80s, I mean, euthanasia, that was really a hot topic at that point. Remember Jack Kevorkian and Dr. Death and all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, who am I to make that decision? And that was the first time, sort of a sparkle of realizing at that time, it wasn't my decision. I mean, I was there to help patients and to comfort them and cure them as best I could, but there are certain things that wasn't my decision. That it was God's decision. And that surfaced and then went away a while later. But that's the case I would call as a blessing, his passing, just because it's so miserable. But that one sticks in my mind. I remember, I can see him right now laying in that bed, shoulder away. It was, yeah.
Mark, I've had that miracle in my life. Within the past year, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And it was found by accident. So it was no accident. God told me to get in. And He instructed the doctors. He helped them to know what to do. I had lost 4 uncles to that, so I know how bad that can be. And I know between all the prayers everyone here has said, God will guide them so that I didn't have to go through that. So it's a miracle, and it's God's blessing. And it's real.
Absolutely.
What's the worst thing to have? Bad luck, bad genetics, or bad environment?
Well, as I said, start by picking the right parents.
My choice.
Hey, Mark, could you tell us what year you graduated from nursing home?
1977.
77. Wow. Okay.
So it's been because we had our 40th last year.
Oh.
This last summer. It's been a long time. That's an interesting question. Genetics versus environment. Both are important. There was actually just a report that life longevity is actually more about environment than it is genetics. We used to think it was about genetics. So, but there isn't a great example of where the two really interact. I mean, your genetics kind of dictates your potential and some things you might be at risk for, but how you live your life, diet, exercise, faith, all will influence how those genes are expressed. It's called epigenetic regulation. So how you live your life, the environment can influence how your genes affect you. So it really is the two. It's not one versus the other, it's the two together. So clean living actually is important. Now what did you say, my doctor?
You're still here. You're calling
So it's pretty late for some of us, huh?
Yeah, it's too late for many of us here.
So why did you leave Eli Lilly and go to San Diego?
The leaving there was actually a career move for me, as I sort of felt I had gone as far as I could at Eli Lilly, and so the opportunity in San Diego was I felt a good career move. I'm almost 60, not quite, but almost 60, so there's a few years left, but not many. So it was a chance to, I think, keep pushing myself, to keep growing and excelling, and so this is a job of much more responsibility than I had in the past. It was, it just happened to be in San Diego. I mean, not a bad choice. We had some family in the Southern California on the West Coast, so.
I want to correct you.
Of course you do.
If you graduated high school in 1977, you're 58. That's not almost 60.
That's a guy that's 58.
Damn it, I'm not admitting to 59.
So when I started running in actually John Glenn in the cross country team with Mr. Thomas, who taught math in the 8th grade. I started running in junior high and high school and did some in college, and then life happened. I stopped running for 3 years and started again a couple of years ago. But to your point, I keep thinking at this age I can still do it, which is I consider a major blessing. I really do. I think, I'm running 20 miles a week. It's like, that's actually not very fast. I ran a 10K race a few weeks ago and got beat by a 9-year-old girl, but...
They run fast.
Hey, when you're 58, you take those lumps.
Look, I'm 6 times older than you, and you're being coached by your dad who's running with her. It's like, I'm okay with it. I can do this at my age.
Yeah.
I want to make a couple comments. In the New Testament Greek, the word for miracle is dunamis, which is the same word as power. So I'd like you to think, and I think you're sort of, Mark, in your comments, sometimes a miracle is perceived as a suspension of the normal rules of nature. But it's as biblical, if not more biblical, to see any evidence of the power of God as a miracle. Whether it's encouraging the body to do what it's created to do and be healthy, or something that has no other rational explanation except God intervened. And I think that's a page out of your book, I think, and what you were saying. So that's just something to keep in mind. The other thing, I'm struck by how the New Testament is filled with some stories where Jesus feeds 5,000 with 5 loaves of bread and 2 small fish. Or there's a Sermon on the Mount, and I don't know about you, but I picture more than 10 people sitting at his feet if he was on a mountainside. And yet there were other times where he reached out to one. And how in medicine too, I mean, with what you shared today, God calls some people to deal with the individual, and God calls some people to deal with bigger issues so that the people that deal with the individual have better tools or whatever. And again, the diversity in our callings and the way God chooses to work in our world. And so, Mark, you've given us more food for thought today about that and from your own perspective, and we are certainly grateful for that and for your work in your chosen field. We're also very grateful for the partnership that you share with us, you and I, at John Glenn. And we're thankful that you come back to visit your mom once in a while. I know one other thought I had. When Ed was dying this summer, and the grandkids were making their way to Grandpa's bedside, to Opa's bedside, I know at least with Andre, your youngest nephew, Grandpa's last words were, get an education. Because how often doesn't God work through the education that we benefit from and that we are then equipped to share with others? So, I mean, very true to your dad and your mom in that regard too. So we're grateful for a lot of reasons this morning. So, with regard to next week, the middle of this week, I got a text from our young organist saying he has a class next Sunday at noon and he can't do adult ed, my calling. Which I thought, doggone it, I've been really anxious to hear what Tom has to share. And so we have scrambled, and Pat Hagan will be in my calling next Sunday. That's chapter 2 of Pat Hagan. And so Pat will be on the 11th, and then, I don't remember, I think then Tong, and then Diana Swanson will round out the series. So hope you can stay for that too. And again, Mark, thanks very much.